Welcome back to the deep dive. Tonight, we aren't just, reading history. We are stepping into a very specific moment in time where the fabric of reality seemed to get a little, a little thin.
Just a little bit. It's really the perfect vibe for what we're covering today.
Yeah, so we're turning the lights down, we're getting comfortable, and honestly, we might be getting a little bit spooked today.
Oh, for sure, because we're dealing with remote viewing, telekinesis, and the very distinct possibility that your bad mood is actually destroying your car's engine.
That last part is going to haunt me. But before we spiral into the existential dread of car maintenance, let's orient ourselves for a second. We are traveling back to September 18th, 1967.
Right, a Monday night.
Exactly, a Monday night in Elmira, New York. And we are looking specifically at session 365 of the early sessions, book 8 of the Seth Material.
Which is just a classic era for this material. I mean, this is right in the thick of Jane Roberts' development.
Absolutely. And for anyone new to our deep dives or to this topic in general, we need to be very clear about where this incredible data comes from. This is from the Seth Material, and it's published by the New Awareness Network.
It's important to get that on the record.
Yeah, and just so we're all entirely on the same page, this podcast will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We're just here to learn, to explore, and, see if we can expand our definitions of what's actually possible.
And this session definitely pushes those boundaries hard.
It really does. Because today isn't just about high-level esoteric philosophy. It's about the messy, weird intersection of the paranormal and the completely mundane.
Right, the everyday stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we have a literal breakup scare between a psychic and her spirit guide. We have a miracle involving a 1960s Ford. And then we have this absolute barrage of remote viewing data involving a Jesuit priest, a storm in the Caribbean, and a banana.
The banana is a highlight for me. It really illustrates how strange the translation of psychic data can be.
Oh, we are definitely getting to the banana, I promise. But I want to start with the actual mission of this deep dive. We aren't just recounting ghost stories for you guys. We're looking at a specific threshold in the lives of Jane Roberts, who, channeled Seth and her husband, Robert Butts.
Right, because something fascinating is happening to Jane in September of '67. She is getting really, really good at this.
Yeah, she's developing her own psychic abilities entirely separate from the trance states where Seth speaks through her.
Exactly. She's starting to get these flashes of intuition and clairvoyance while she's wide awake, just, doing the dishes or walking around.
And paradoxically, instead of this making her feel powerful, it brings up this huge gnawing insecurity. It's almost like a breakup scare. She's worried she's going to accidentally ghost her own spirit guide.
I mean, it's a valid fear, honestly. It's the classic anxiety of the student surpassing the master. She's basically wondering, if I can access this information on my own, does Seth just fade away? Is he just a set of training wheels?
Right. And then on the flip side of that psychological drama, we have the story of the Ford, the car that fixed itself. We're going to talk about mind over matter, but not in the, the think positive and get a promotion kind of way.
No, we're talking about the literal physics of rust and corrosion.
Exactly. It's a segment that might genuinely make you cancel your next mechanic appointment. Or, I don't know, at least change how you talk to your dashboard.
So grab a blanket, maybe check the locks on the doors.
Just kidding. But let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's unpack the context first. Section 1 here is what I'm calling the breakup scare. But to really understand it, we have to look at energy economics.
That's a really great term for it.
So just before the session starts, and remember, it's 9:146 p.m., Jane and Robert are chatting. Jane had a session a few days prior, session 363, where she achieved excellent results. But the kicker was, she felt like she did it mostly on her own.
Right, she wasn't leaning on Seth's energy as much.
Yeah, and for most people, that would be a triumph. You'd think she'd be popping champagne like, look at me, I'm leveling up.
But Jane is wired differently. She starts spiraling instead. She wonders, if my own abilities keep increasing, is the Seth personality going to fade away entirely?
It's a profound insecurity. You have to remember, to Jane and Robert, by 1967, Seth isn't just a voice. He's a mentor. He's almost a member of the family in a strange way.
He's this huge source of wisdom and stability for them. So the idea of losing that connection just because you're getting too competent, that is a very complex emotional knot.
It's the fear that graduation means saying goodbye forever.
Precisely. So the session starts. Seth comes through, and he doesn't waste any time with pleasantries. He goes straight to the heart of her fear.
Yeah, he says, "Good evening. Now, my friend Ruburt does not need to worry. I shall not desert him."
I love that the session notes explicitly include that he smiled when he said it. You can really feel the warmth there. He's reassuring her. He goes on to say, our relationship will be a steady and enduring one.
Right, and he explains that while Jane's abilities, and again he calls her Ruburt, while her abilities are developing, he will usually be behind him in these endeavors.
So it's not a replacement at all. It's an evolution of their partnership. He's shifting from being the driver to being the navigator.
But he explicitly states he'll continue to speak to her in the trance state, too. He actually explains that he retreated on purpose during a previous session, the Gallagher session, specifically so Jane could become more familiar with the immediacy involved in going after such data.
It's exactly like a parent letting go of the back of a bicycle. You have to let them wobble a bit so they know they can actually balance, but you don't leave the park.
That's a perfect analogy. But then Seth pivots to explain why this breakthrough is happening right now. And this brings us to that concept of energy economics you mentioned. This is such a key insight for anyone listening, whether you're, trying to be psychic or just trying to survive a 40-hour work week.
It's incredible. Seth links her psychic breakthrough directly to her physical health.
Yes. He says, the development of his abilities is now showing in definite terms because the improvement in health is freeing much energy that had been bound up in his dilemma.
Bound up in his dilemma. Let's really parse that. He's talking about illness or physical stress acting as a massive resource hog.
Exactly. Think of your body like a computer CPU or like a smartphone battery. You have a finite amount of processing power. If you have a heavy virus scan running in the background, that's the illness, the chronic pain, the stress. It's taking up, say, 60 or 70% of your total energy.
Right, which means you only have 30% left for literally everything else. For writing, for your job, for being patient with your spouse, and in Jane's case, for psychic expansion.
So when you're sick, your creativity isn't gone. It's occupied.
It's reallocated. It is busy keeping the ship afloat. Seth says, the abilities had been developing, but he did not have sufficient energy to use his growing proficiency.
That is just incredibly validating because I think we all have those moments where we feel stuck. We feel like we've completely lost our spark. But Seth is suggesting that maybe we haven't lost anything at all. Maybe we're just tired. Maybe our energy is just busy fixing something internally that we aren't even fully aware of.
It reframes the entire concept of resting. Resting isn't doing nothing. It's reclaiming your energy reserves. It's shutting down those background programs so you can apply that energy to actual growth. If you don't free up the energy from the dilemma, you simply can't fuel the breakthrough.
Health is fuel. That's the ultimate takeaway there.
It really is. And speaking of fixing things, we have to talk about the car. Because if health is fuel for the mind, Seth is about to suggest that the mind is the literal mechanic for matter.
The miracle of the Ford, this story is wild.
It is easily one of the most practical examples of magical thinking actually working in the entire Seth Material.
So let's set the scene for you guys. Robert and Jane have this Ford, and by all accounts, it is an absolute lemon. It is a disaster on wheels.
Limping along is the exact phrase used in the session notes.
Yeah, it's been bad all summer. They literally can't drive it over 35 or 40 miles per hour.
Which, let's be honest, is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
If you're on a highway doing 35, you are a hazard to yourself and everyone else.
And there's this violent vibration. The steering wheel shakes. The mechanics, like actual trained professionals, looked at it and said it was unsafe to be used outside city limits. They were afraid the transmission or the engine was going to literally shake itself apart on the road.
It sounds like a total lost cause. A money pit? The kind of car you just drive to the junkyard and walk away from without looking back?
But then something happens, and it's not a mechanic. No wrench ever touches this car.
No. Robert notes that he and Jane simply stopped worrying about the car.
They just let it go. That sounds way too simple. Just don't worry about it, and your transmission fixes itself.
It's deeper than just ignoring it. They released the negative attention. They stopped actively focusing on its age, its terrible condition, and the constant frustration it caused them. They stopped projecting the concept of brokenness onto the vehicle.
And what was the actual result of that?
An overnight resurgence. Robert writes that on a trip to visit his parents, the car suddenly ran at 60 miles per hour. Smoothly, effortlessly. Absolutely no vibration.
From shaking violently at 35 to cruising smoothly at 60, just by changing their internal attitude.
Robert even jokes in the notes that he has to be careful driving it now because the car will now leap ahead almost without warning. It went from a dying donkey to a racehorse.
Okay, now hold on. This is where the skeptic in me, and I know some of you listening are thinking this too, says, okay, maybe some gunk just finally cleared out of the fuel line. Coincidences happen. Engines are weird.
It's a totally fair point. But Seth addresses this directly during the session. He gives a specific mechanical diagnosis. And this is where it gets deeply into the physics of thought.
Lay it on me.
Seth says, a small bolt in a ring with built-up corrosion. This was the difficulty.
A corroded bolt. Okay, that is physical matter. That's rust, oxidation.
But then he explains the cure. He says, the corrosion was washed away by a quicker flow of liquid.
And that flow is caused by what, exactly?
The release of their negative attention. Seth explicitly links the two phenomena. He says the trouble was caused mentally, and the condition corrected mentally when you release the mechanism from a negative attention.
Whoa. Okay, let's just pause and really look at that for a second. This suggests that if you hate your car if you look at it every morning and think, you absolute piece of junk, I hate you, you are actually creating the rust.
According to this session, yes. Or at the very least, you are maintaining the precise atomic conditions that allow the corrosion to persist. You are restricting the mechanical flow with your mind.
That is genuinely chilling. It implies that human consciousness interacts with mechanical objects on a molecular level.
We tend to think of a car as a dead thing, right? Metal, rubber, oil, completely inert. But Seth implies it's an active part of our energetic environment. It's part of our camouflage reality. If you project tension, you create physical stagnation in the objects around you.
So if you relax, the fluids flow.
Exactly. It was washed away by a quicker flow of liquid. It implies that their mental tension was acting like a physical clamp on the engine. When they finally relaxed, the energy moved, the physical fluids moved, and the actual corrosion was scrubbed away.
Wow. I am never yelling at my toaster ever again.
It's probably a very solid policy.
And we should definitely note here, Jane knows absolutely nothing about cars.
Zero. Robert points that out explicitly in his notes.
Yeah.
She doesn't even drive. She doesn't know what a ring or a bolt does in an engine. Yet, in trance, she conveyed this highly specific mechanical data about bolts and rings and fluid dynamics.
It's a pretty incredible validation of the whole mind over matter concept. It's not just about bending spoons with your mind at a party. It's unclogging carburetors with your vibe.
It is practical magic at its finest. And it really begs the question, what else in our daily lives is corroded just because we keep staring at the rust?
Man, that is the question of the night right there. But Seth isn't done with the impossible yet. We've had the emotional reassurance, we've had the magical car repair. Now Seth shifts gears completely. He asks for a moment, and the whole vibe changes.
The backdrop totally shifts from a cozy living room in Elmira to the Caribbean.
Remote viewing time.
Yep. Seth starts getting impressions regarding the Jesuit and the cat lover.
And these are friends of theirs, right?
Yes, Bill and Poggy Gallagher.
Yeah.
They're away on vacation. And Seth starts describing what they're doing, seeing, and experiencing in real time.
But it's not just a simple, oh, they're on a beach. It's weirdly specific and fragmented, almost like puzzle pieces.
That is very typical of high-level remote viewing.
Yeah.
You don't usually get a perfect 4K video stream in your mind. You get sensory bursts. You get raw symbols.
Like the spelling thing. Seth is clearly struggling to name a place. He says Minnesota and then tries Minnesota.
He's trying to phonetically interpret a sound he's hearing clairaudiently, or maybe a word he's seeing on a physical sign, but he just can't quite lock it in. It shows the real effort involved in translating the data.
And then we get to the banana.
The legendary banana.
Seth says, a banana with another significance, used as a symbol.
I love this detail because it shows the symbolic language of the subconscious perfectly. It's not just a piece of fruit. To the people involved, to Bill and Peggy, that banana means something highly specific, a private joke, a code word, a shared memory.
I am dying to know what a symbolic banana represents in this context. A hidden danger, a slip-up, a midnight snack.
We will probably never know. But it's immediately followed by him spelling out "mi-shopping."
Which sounds exactly like a code.
Or a physical sign they are looking at. The dashes usually indicate words separated by silence or a physical space on a board.
Then he zeroes in on the Jesuit. He says, a fine torch.
And this leads to a really fascinating psychological insight. Seth says he assumes an attitude that he does not feel. It is a moment of falseness for him.
That is so deep. He's remote viewing a man's internal emotional state from thousands of miles away. And then he says, the Jesuit, digging for something, finds something else.
It's highly cinematic. You can instantly picture this priest on an island, maybe looking around a shop for a souvenir, but spiritually, internally, finding a moment of hypocrisy or sudden realization.
And then the visual impressions just start firing off rapidly. 9 people on a boat, a temple on stilts.
A missionary here with a watch, tar paper, used for huts or buildings, black.
It's basically a montage scene.
It really is. And he adds a 5-star designation here.
But here is where it gets really trippy. And honestly, this is why I love the Seth Material so much. He doesn't just see the vacationers in 1967. He sees the history of the location.
The layers of time.
He mentions an island name, Ame, and describes it as same on 3 sides and different on another side.
But then he drops a specific date, 1631.
1631, and a landing from Portugal, and also a man named Scott.
A small battle and a storm.
So, wait, he's looking at Bill and Peggy on vacation in 1967, but he's also seeing a Portuguese landing in 1631 at the exact same geographic location.
Yes, because to Seth, time is not linear. It's all happening at once. This is his core concept of simultaneous time. When he focuses on a specific coordinate, that island, he sees the now of the Gallaghers, but the now of 1631 is just as active and visible to him. They are like transparent overlays on top of each other.
That is just mind-bending. It implies that when you go on vacation, you aren't just visiting a place in space. You're walking through a dense cloud of history that is still actively happening.
The ghosts of the past aren't gone at all. They're just operating on a different frequency. Seth is basically tuning the radio dial and hearing both stations clearly at once.
He says, 5 approaches to one place here, one central place of interest. It really feels like he's hovering over the island, looking straight down through the layers of time.
It creates a very rich, heavily textured reality. Nothing is ever just empty space. It's full of memory. It's full of action that we just can't see because we are firmly locked into our root assumption of linear time.
Okay, let's come back to Elmira, New York. Back to 1967. Because as spooky and expansive as the Caribbean viewing is, Seth always makes sure to ground things in practical, real-world validation.
He knows Jane and Robert need that proof. They are skeptics at heart, especially Robert. They need to know this isn't just a very elaborate subconscious imagination.
So let's talk about the business side of things for a minute. The ESP class Jane was running.
Right, Jane had recently started teaching these ESP classes in her home. And Seth had actually made a prediction back in June, in session 348, that she would have exactly 7 students by the end of the summer.
Did she?
It came completely true. Exactly 7 students.
Massive check mark right there.
Now, in this session, he doubles down on the predictions. He predicts the class will grow to 12 students by the winter holidays.
And he gets very specific about the timeline. He says, I believe he will have 2 more students between now and the 10th of October.
And he adds, they will be steady ones.
I love how entirely mundane yet totally impossible that is. Predicting the exact head count of a local night class. It's not some grand, you will save the world prophecy. It's literally, you're going to need 2 more folding chairs by October 10th.
But it matters deeply. If he can accurately predict the student countdown to the day, it lends massive credibility to the esoteric metaphysical stuff. If he's right about the chairs, maybe he's right about the fundamental nature of the soul.
He also gives Jane some practical career advice here. She was apparently thinking about teaching these classes in an adult education evening program, like a much more formal school setting.
And Seth says, essentially, not yet.
He says attention should be directed here in outside classes. He strongly prefers the intimate home classes.
He says, the more intimate home classes will help him develop his own abilities also.
It's all about the environment. A formal, fluorescent-lit classroom might be too sterile for this kind of work. The home environment allows for that necessary vulnerability we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And then, shifting gears again, there is the publisher, Frederick Fell.
The man who would eventually bring these books to the rest of the world.
Jane and Robert had met him in New York City on August 16th.
And apparently there was some serious anxiety beforehand regarding that meeting.
Seth mentions their unfortunate expectations and various projections. They were really worried it wouldn't go well. They were basically projecting failure onto the meeting before it even happened.
Which, going back to the lesson of the car, is a terrible idea.
The worst idea. If you project failure onto a publisher, you might corrode the book deal exactly like you corroded the bolt in the engine.
But Seth says the intuitive background was enough to wipe these out within an instant.
An instant liking sprang up between them.
Seth calls it no coincidence. He predicts that unless unforeseen drastic changes occur, affairs with him will work out well.
And spoiler alert for anyone listening, they absolutely did. We are literally reading the resulting book right now.
It's a really nice closed confirmation loop.
And finally, just to wrap up the validation section of this session, We really have to mention the letter.
Yes, John Petrie.
John Petrie from Franklin, Louisiana.
It's a very short letter included by Ruburt at the end of the source material notes. It's dated September 21st, and they received it on September 23rd.
He writes, "Wanted to dash off a note saying I had received the session. Things look better already."
I just hope I've got that faith needed.
It's so incredibly grounding to hear from just a regular guy in Louisiana in 1967 who is just trying to make his life work.
It reminds us that this material didn't exist in a vacuum. Real people were writing letters to Jane, asking for help, getting these typed sessions mailed to them, probably on carbon paper, and actively applying the advice.
He was a literal interactive network decades before the internet existed.
The New Awareness Network, quite literally.
It shows that the Seth material was meant to be practical. It wasn't just abstract theory to ponder. People were using it to physically fix their lives.
So, looking at the whole picture here, what does this all mean for us? We've got a self-repairing Ford, a Jesuit priest experiencing a crisis of authenticity, a psychic class of 12 students, and a very nervous channeler worrying about a breakup.
If we synthesize this entire deep dive, I think there are three massive, life-changing takeaways.
Okay, hit me with number one.
Number one, health is fuel. Your physical well-being and your psychic or creative potential are running on the exact same currency. If you are bound up in illness or stress, you are actively bankrupting your creativity.
That is such a big one. Take care of the physical vessel and the magic naturally follows, and start beating yourself up for being tired. Recognize you are just recharging the primary battery.
Precisely. Number two, mind literally moves matter. The car, the corrosion on the bolt. We have to seriously consider the possibility that our physical environment reflects our internal emotional state. If you are corroded with constant worry, the bolts in your life literally rust. If you relax and flow, the liquid flows.
That is the one I'm going to be obsessing over all week. It really makes you want to monitor your inner monologue much more closely.
And number three, time is entirely fluid. We saw it with the remote viewing of the Caribbean. 1967 and 1631 existing simultaneously in the exact same physical space.
Yeah.
We're walking through active history every single day.
It makes the world feel so much bigger and so much stranger.
And infinitely richer.
So before we sign off tonight, we have a mandatory call to action for you. And honestly, considering everything we just talked about, you owe it to yourself to go directly to the source.
Definitely do not just take our word for it. We are barely scratching the surface here.
Go study the Seth Material books yourself. Visit the New Awareness Network website. You can find their bookstore at sethcenter.com or chew the early sessions.
There is so much more profound insight in those pages than we could ever cover in a single hour.
Seriously. Go get the books. Support the publisher who works so hard to keep this stuff alive for us.
Absolutely.
So I want to leave you with a final thought. A little something to chew on while you drive to work tomorrow.
Hopefully in a car that is running very smoothly.
Hopefully. But here is the question. Seth said the corrosion on that engine bolt was washed away the moment they released the mechanism from a negative attention.
Right.
So what corrosion in your own life is being held in place simply because you refuse to stop staring at it?
Ooh, that is a really good one.
What problem is staying broken just because you're totally obsessed with how broken it is?
Maybe the ultimate fix is just looking away.
Maybe. It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us in the deep dive.
We'll see you next time.
Stay curious.